Welcome to the Third Planet News and Review. I'm Alan Graf, your hippie lawyer. What is the Third Planet Review? Over the years, we've seen on corporate TV programs with panelists that review the news, who push the corporate or the government line, pretending to give an objective analysis of the news that affects all our lives without really doing so. Today, you will hear different perspectives and voices that you don't normally hear dissect and debate the contemporary issues. My guests are all accomplished activists and progressives who have spent the majority of their lives pushing for positive change on our planet. I welcome to the Third Planet News and Review Ina May Gaskin, internationally known midwife and healthcare advocate, author of Spiritual Midwifery and Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, also founder and executive director of the Farm Midwifery Center. Albert Bates, former director of the Natural Rights Center, a public interest law project which has worked on issues related to energy, the environment, genetic engineering, and human rights. He is also the founder and currently a teacher at the Echo Village Training Center at the farm community in Summertown, Tennessee. He's the author of 11 books, including Shutdown, Nuclear Power on Trial, Climate and Crisis, The Greenhouse Effect, and What We Can Do. His post-petroleum survival guide and cookbook, Recipes for Changing Times, just released, envisions the world as it will be transformed by peak oil and climate change. And Peter Schweitzer, Executive Director of Plenty International, a grassroots relief and development agency based here on the farm that works with indigenous peoples around the world and manages projects in support of health, village technology, and the environment. Plenty was one of the first relief groups on the ground in New Orleans after Katrina hit. And now the issues. Panel. In the last election, we saw what was a clear mandate from the people of this country. Across the nation, even in Republican strongholds such as Montana and Virginia, the people threw out the incumbents and gave the Democrats a majority in both houses. Have the Democrats respected that message and done the appropriate follow-through? Peter Schweitzer? I guess that's a good answer.
Giggling, yeah. Well, the problem that we're dealing with is we've got politicians in these positions that are supposed to do things, and I keep thinking of something that the founder of Plenty, Stephen Gaskin, said years ago in the beginning was, don't take over the government, take over the government's function. And in fact, my personal view is that with the government like we have these days, we need to take over a lot of functions. And we're seeing that in Katrina, and we're seeing that in healthcare. We're seeing states take the ball on healthcare, climate change, because they can't wait for the federal government to do anything. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like we had something of a sea change, but whether or not we're going to see any political results remains to be seen.
Right. Ina May?
I think that we have to put the pressure on our representatives because we're just leaving them out there. I mean, November now, we're in February, seems like a long time ago. And so there has to be a daily pressure. If you live in a urban area, get out there with your pots and pans like Molly Ivan suggested, and exhorted, asked us to. But if you live in a rural area, you need to get with your computer and you need to get on your telephone. And I think we've got to put the pressure on their offices and let them hear from us daily. Because and then get our friends and families on board with us, because if you're older and you have you're the breadwinner or whatever, you got to show up the job. Not everybody can get out in the streets with the same ease as somebody who's not got a family yet, can sleeping bag around. But whatever age you are, you're aware. We need to put that pressure. And I like to go read the right-wing websites and listen to what they're saying too, because what I'm hearing this time that I haven't heard for ages is people who say, I voted for Bush twice and now I see what a mistake that was. And I think we've got a lot of people there that are looking at this thing more clearly than they ever have. It looks more clear now.
Right.
And so we've got our work to do. We can't just expect that that vote we did in November is enough. You have to keep up the pressure.
All right. Albert, McCain and the Wall Street Journal have called the Democrats out, saying if they really believe in pulling the troops out of Iraq, they would do more than try to pass meaningless, non-binding resolutions, which we find in the House today. Do you agree with McCain and the Wall Street Journal?
It's nice to see McCain becoming so outspoken about the war. I think that that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. The Democrats, you know, mandate is a difficult thing to say because it's really hard to read what an election was really saying and who was saying it. I see an awful lot of Lexuses driving around with W stickers still on them. And I think in Tennessee and everywhere that I go. And I think that they're out there and that people need to be respectful of everyone's opinions. And so some of what we're seeing now is the Democrats sort of testing the waters. And they're putting out a non-binding resolution. They're not talking about campaign finance reform yet. The electoral reform where they changed the way the balloting is done, where's that? Where's the investigation of Katrina and what happened? All of these different things are sort of like back burner to sort of test that first 100-hour agenda, and then maybe they'll go farther forward. I think the positive signs, though, are the changes in the committees, who you're seeing who has taken over as chairman of the various committees. And because the Republicans during their period in power gave so much authority to the committee chairs, they're now able to do things like subpoena independently of their own committee. And you're starting to see Henry Waxman and Patrick Leahy and some others starting to reach out and pull the threads on the sweater of the administration. And where that leads still remains to be seen.
My question is this enough? I mean, we're seeing what I see in place is a juggernaut. This is administration that is proceeding full steam ahead. 3 warship carriers to the Persian Gulf. That's one more than they had when we declared war against Iraq the last 2 times. And as Ray McGovern says, they're trying to create a Gulf of Tonkin incident. All of this is happening. There's still basically Cheney thumbing his nose at Congress. Are the Democrats being too milquetoast, or do you? It sounds to me like you're actually agreeing that maybe caution is good. I don't agree with that.
Well, you say that they sent another carrier into the Gulf. Yeah. Over last weekend, Iran did a military exercise where they test-fired missiles to show that they could take out a large ship or several large ships and block the Straits of Oman. 86% of the world's oil flows through the Straits of Oman. So if you think that having any number of carriers there is going to matter, there's no way that we're going to be able to have a successful war against Iraq that won't cause world devastation.
Right.
The other thing is that the hands of this administration are somewhat tied, and not just thanks to the last election, but because they've lost all credibility, because people have begun to wake up to where these folks are at. And once you've lost your credibility, it's really hard to sell a war.
Right, that's
happening. What they're up against, and that's world opinion and national opinion. They're swimming upstream, and they're looking kind of ridiculous now, trying to make a case for almost anything.
Right.
Nobody believes them anymore.
Well, the stakes are so high for them too that we have to expect that they're going to go for broke. I mean, it's the giant poker game, and if you lose a lot of hands, and here they are doubling bets. I think when you look at, I'm trying to look at it from Cheney's point of view, since it's pretty clear he's the man.
That's right.
Okay, it's going to be really interesting to watch the next few days and see what happens with the Scooter Libby trial, because lies. At what point does it become impeachable? For me, it's been there quite a long time.
Yeah, they already made a pretty good case for high crimes and misdemeanors so far in the trial.
For me, it's been in which order, and my preference would be number 1 Cheney, and then Bush, and then we got Nancy, and we see where we go from there.
Yeah, the credibility factor, that's interesting you've raised that. Up till today, before the New York Times came out with an article about people being skeptical of the propaganda machine around Iran. Up till today, the Times looked like they were doing Judith Miller too. And in fact, Amy Goodman came out, Democracy Now!, exposing that. It seems like the Times reacted. It's a little different this time. The Times try to get off on doing the cheerleader thing again, and then today they actually had an article about talking about people being skeptical of the presentation. What's the difference this time?
Well, the media is becoming the story. This week, Frontline is starting a series on the media's disassembling to create the conditions for the war in Iraq. And I think that the media is now getting up to be on the hot seat. And the Times is certainly feeling that heat.
Right. Let's switch to the presidential race, particularly the Democratic side. Once again, let's talk. It seems to be steered by the corporate media. We're being presented with a three-way race between Clinton, Obama, and Edwards, and virtually excluding all the other candidates, including Dennis Kucinich, the most progressive of the bunch. We're still the same old, where the media is telling us who to vote for? Peter?
It's pop culture, you know. It's American Idol disguised as politics. So, you know, this is part of the problem. I was talking to a journalist about a year ago about how could this country actually elect somebody like a George Bush. And we were talking about, you know, the American mind has gotten a little mushy from perhaps my personal theory is bad diet, bad television, bad advertising, we're still trying to uncover from years and years of that kind of stuff. We got to get a lot smarter.
And lack of information. I mean, if you travel outside the country and you read, newspapers, actual newspapers, and USA Today is like, oh, please. That's the only one you can find, in so many places, and there's so little in it that makes Reader's Digest look like an encyclopedia of some sort.
Right.
I walked into a library in a little town in Ohio last week and picked up Maclean's. Okay, that's the Canadians read it, but you wouldn't know that we read the same language. And there I read an account written by a young American exile, U.S. exile, who was in the Iraq War, and he was one of these guys that had to go out on the night missions of busting into the Iraqi homes because suspected terrorists lived there. And he described what it was like to rouse all these people out of their bed, find nothing, and you tore it up worse, he said, if you didn't find anything. He was then approached by a young girl who spoke English, looked at him with eyes of hatred. Why are you taking away my brothers? Because they took away all males over 5 feet high. And then later, he participated in more than 200 such missions, never found anybody. Every one of those people, have to be seething with the injustice of this, the righteous indignation, which we would, if we had read that, if we'd ever seen that in the U.S. media, we'd feel different about things. He also described having to guard a house while some officers went in and apparently raped some of the women. So this is in the Canadian media, where every Canadian can read that. I have not seen any of the left-wing blogs in this country access that. It happens to be a publication that you have to pay to get a subscription to, but it's
right.
It's journalism.
Yeah, corporate media is feeding basically the American populace pablum, and I think that goes back to your theory of maybe the mass intelligence of America has declined due to fast foods, fast media, and what else was there?
Plus an overload. On the other side, it's an overload of outrage. Personally, we're just folks like us are just stuttering with what can you say? I mean, it's beyond belief.
Now what do you do with media that's owned 40% by Rupert Murdoch, one man?
That's right.
The other 60% is owned by people who buy their suits at the same place.
and exactly. Also we're a huge country, with oceans. It takes some means to get someplace else, and then even if you wanted to learn Spanish, when I was in school, it was hard to find a way to do it. Easier now, and now so many people complain. you've got a perfect opportunity now to learn Spanish. Shouldn't we rejoice? You know, it would give us access to more news. So I think that
right. Today we're trying to build walls on the border.
Yeah. So
to
I'd like to
folks.
see. You know, the curious person shouldn't have to work so hard to get the news.
Right.
And the people who aren't so curious, I mean, help us. We really need to know more about the rest of the world, because we stumble around this colossal, ignorant giant wrecking places and going, oh, why are they angry with us?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Cheney and Bush have the lowest approval ratings since they've been in office. Cheney comes in at 14% approval rating. These guys obviously like power. They've, in my mind, spit on the Constitution, shown complete disrespect for law and order, have taken the power of the executive branch to heights that have never seen before. Even Nixon would be envious of what they've done. What do you think lurks in the minds of these folks to perpetuate their hold on the reins of power? Are they really going to give it up in 2 years? We've had a conversation about this. Is there going to be an election? We saw an election that was thrown 8 years ago. What do you think is going on in the minds?
These are the guys, Alan, that of our generation that missed all the opportunities to grow up. You know, we went through the civil rights movement. No, these guys weren't involved in that. World travel? No, they weren't that. They were never hippies.
They didn't even resist the Vietnam War.
They didn't even go to the
out.
war, or all the different chances to that we had to grow up. They missed. So now we got these spoiled brats running things. That's they're our worst nightmare. They know it.
Yeah.
And they revel in it.
Right. Well, my question is, do you think there's people who are tout conspiracy theories about 9/11, that the Bush administration actually knew about it, in some way was complicit? They flew out all the bin Laden family the day after. Michael Moores even pointed it out in his film. Do you think they're up to something else to try to, again, play the fear factor? Because the fear factor has played well with them for the last 6 years, getting into Iraq and getting more power. Now that they're sort of backed into the corner, is there a possibility they're going to do that, something like that again?
Well, it's clear that if an election happened today, they would lose badly. And they must know that. And if you look on the Republican side, who are the candidates that are lining up? And none of those look like they would have any better poll numbers than Cheney and Bush at this point in time. And actually, I'm wondering why there are people on the Democratic side lining up, because if I would not want to be president in 2009. January 2009, things are going to be a whole lot worse than they are, or they were for Abraham Lincoln when he took office, you know?
It's a challenge.
They've really messed it up badly. But okay, yeah, it's a challenge, and there are people who will rise to that challenge. The question is it even likely that there will be an election? Because these are neocons who have their agenda. Their agenda is a world hegemony. And for them to recognize that, you know, they have low poll numbers, so they'll probably lose the next election, and just go ahead anyway, seems to be saying that something's lurking that's going to change the poll numbers, they think. What is that?
Right. I guess we can't get too paranoid, but knowing these guys, we can expect anything, can't we?
Would you want to wake up this morning and be George Bush or Dick Cheney?
I don't know. Is that a rhetorical
and then
question?
what does it take to live with your conscience? You know, you don't have a conscience. It's the only thing I can assume.
I think maybe there isn't one. I think that what they are more likely to have is a fear of ending up, you know, behind bars, you know, in the world.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. You see,
exactly.
Because, you know, one of the
Pinochet.
things there's a renewed interest in the Nuremberg trials.
That's
know?
right.
You know, we didn't have. A lot of people couldn't have even told you what those were. But if you watch C-SPAN, you know, you can see there's some books being written on this. And certainly people in other countries, certainly European young people, are much more aware. And that's, you know, this is not the first era that's so, but it trickles in here, it's happening. And so I'm putting a lot of, I'm very interested in what we're going to see in this campaign, and what real issues come up, because it seems to me like there's young people who are aware now that we didn't have 4 years ago, that we didn't have 8 years ago. And I think that they have a lot to offer.
And people like my 90-year-old mother who can't watch George Bush on television. She can't even watch him. She's more radical than I am.
No, there are a lot of people whose blood pressure goes up that just,
Yeah.
flip the channel. They already know what they think, and they're not going to change any more than some of the neocons who've gotten hold of that ring of power, and they're not going to let go of that either. So a lot is going to be, what are these people in the middle who see that the thing they thought they voted for is something very different, and that, yes, these lies actually have counted, have cost uncalculable numbers of lives, and this can only get worse as this war goes on.
Now, John Edwards, who is the third viable candidate that the corporate press has put out there, is actually raising the class issue. He started his campaign talking about two different Americas. He's now talking about universal health care. Is that a change? Is that a good change?
The best thing he did was announce it from the Gulf.
Announce it from the Gulf.
Bring attention to that.
Right.
I like it that he's talking about class. I think that that's very important. It's about time, And if they raise that's class warfare, let's go. We need this discussion badly because the gap between the wealthy and the poor has never been greater.
And he's going to need to start talking about energy. He's going to need to talk about climate change. He's going to need to talk about world population. He's going to need to talk about some of the serious things that are coming down the tracks at us pretty darn fast.
Yeah.
He's also going to need to, I think, look at his health care reform issue with a little more clarity, because I think that he hasn't really taken the jump all the way to single payer. And if you don't do that, by default, you're going to leave in all these powerful insurance companies, and you're really not going to have any reform that can happen or hold.
Right. The last issue I want to talk about, which Albert raised, is global warming and climate crisis. Just yesterday, Richard Branson, an English billionaire, announced with Al Gore at his side that he'd give $25 million to any scientist who figured out how to extract greenhouse gases from the atmosphere in an effort to save us from the effects of global warming. I looked at that and I started thinking, is this a fairyland technological fix? From a psychological perspective, a good thing to be touting to a planet that's addicted to the consumption of fossil fuels. Somebody's going to fix it. Big Daddy's going to fix it for us. All we need is some money. We'll do that sort of thing.
I'll take the money and tell me answer in 2 words. Plant trees.
There you go.
The simple fact of the matter is that we're losing trees off the planet's surface at a faster rate now than we were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that rate seems to be accelerating with the growth of industry in China. China has actually now become a bigger lumber producer going around the world and getting forests than Malaysia was, or Indonesia.
Yeah.
And so we need to begin to look at some of that and say, how do we get more trees to cover the surface of the planet? How do we reforest? How do we afforest? How do we use that atmospheric scrub brush of giant forests that will help protect us from the effects of global warming as time goes on?
I just read a really good story about Niger where farmers were watching their farmland disappear to erosion and the Sahel Desert encroaching more and more into the country, and the farmers on their own, without support from any American aid groups or anything, just started planting trees, and they started farming around, leaving their trees in the field, some trees in the field, and farming around their trees. And they've reforested like 7 million acres with millions and millions of trees, and it has made the farmers more prosperous. It has given their climate has changed. They're getting more rain. They did it on their own, and this is something that we really support. Is that's the way you do development.
Imagine,
at that level.
Imagine guerrilla tree planters out planting trees in the night, out there on the plains,
Right. Well, we're just about out of time, and I want to thank you for appearing on the Third Planet Review. That's it for today. I want to thank our guests for participating, and I look forward to more of these sessions in the future. This is Alan Graf bidding you adieu. Take care of yourselves.